Linton. That is Jarom Jordan. Joining us now on the Deseret First Credit Union hotline via Zoom is Riley Nelson, former BYU quarterback, and as I have mentioned a couple of times and on previous shows, the last man to quarterback a 10-win BYU football team. Riley, welcome back. How are you?
Doing really well, fellas. Excited. I was talking with Ben, the producer, before this. I'm like, so are we past the point of no return? And he's like, nope. Not until the ball kicks off will we be safe on this game. But I'm staying hopeful and optimistic.
Yeah, a wild reality that we are dealing with when it comes to live sports. Now, rarely in the history of BYU football have the Cougars played a game early in the season and then waited 19 days to play again. You got to go back to 2001 with the September 11 situation to find that long of a break. So what kind of product do you expect early in this second game against Troy?
I would hope the same product we saw in Navy come out and take care of business. It's essentially a second first game is the way that I'm looking at it. And so you should approach it with all the same things that you do. A lot of excitement, a lot of preparation, a lot of time spent on the opponent and what they can do. So that's what I would expect. Of course, you are in a little bit of danger, having had such an impressive and really dynamic performance against Navy. You're a little bit of drinking your own Kool-Aid. There's a little bit of that, thinking that like you're hot stuff and that you're going to come out and beat everybody 55 to whatever. But you'd be best served to put that out of your mind and really treat this as like a restart to the season, even though you've already played a game.
I think that's a great point. It's been 19 days. It's been forever. BYU's dealt with COVID itself. They're dealing with, Brigham Young early said, hey, the Saints will be cursed with riches. And here BYU is cursed with a 18, if you will, affirmed, but also cursed in the poison that Eric Mateos keeps calling it. Oh, we're so good at this. We're so good at that. We haven't done anything. We're 1-0. That's the rhetoric. So how do you feel about the affirmation? That is a ranking. It's great, but also the expectation after one game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with Coach Mateos, and like the great teams that I was on. You mentioned the last quarterback to be on 10 wins, and by the way, thank you for that distinction. It's kind of an arbitrary honor, but I'll take it. But the reality is, how do you get to 10 wins? Like, you get there by winning. And by preparing for 10 weeks and winning 10 single games, right? There's no way to win one game and get credit for three. So you have to take each game on its merit. And I guess I haven't been allowed in practice for obvious reasons. And while I do get a little bit of access to the tape just so I can kind of prep a little bit for the games, I don't get a feel for the practice. But one thing that I would hope is that there's, over these 19 days, if I were still on the team, and that I expect has happened, is that there's been an intense dedication from this leadership to compete internally. Like, I would have hoped that there's been some knockdown, drag-out, 2-minute drills or goal line or red zone periods, even one-on-ones, right, where guys have kind of really competed against each other versus going through the motions. Because after putting up 55 points and looking so dominant, you can easily, anybody, even the most experienced teams, can easily fall into that trap. But as long as as what I expect to have happened and what I believe has happened, have fostered an incredibly intense internal competitive environment, as long as that's happened, I think they'll come out Saturday and be just fine.
Former BYU quarterback and current BYU football radio analyst Riley Nelson with us on BYU Sports Nation. We've been discussing margin of victory today, Riley, and BYU will have what looks like fewer opportunities this season to, quote-unquote, impress the people that are watching across the nation. So in this weird COVID-19 season, how much does margin of victory matter for BYU and how they're perceived nationally?
Look, I know you were doing Voice of the Nation, and a couple people affirmed that this was something that important. But in my opinion, the quickest way that you can become extremely unimpressive to poll voters, fans, everyone across the nation, the college football landscape, is to focus on something like margin of victory. All the great teams, to quote Nick Saban or Lane Kiffin, that is rat poison. I can tell you, I know LSU, and it remains to be seen if BYU is the caliber of team that LSU was last year, but those guys beat a lot of good teams by impressive point margins. I can guarantee you that the point margin was never a main focus for them. But what was coming out, playing with incredible physicality, executing your assignment, and then, they happen to have the luxury of a bunch of horses, right? First and second round NFL talent. I think BYU can check definitely 2 of those 3 boxes, in that they come out and play with incredible physicality. That's what they showed against Navy. 1 penalty in the whole game, and really it was an arbitrary one, kind of a weird false start penalty. So they showed their ability to execute. And I think while we've got some bright spots of potential horses, there's still a lot of room for them to develop. But this is one of the more talented squads that we've seen in the last few years. So those are the things that naturally produce, those are the things that you focus on, and the margin of victory will take care of itself. If you try and focus on the result rather than the process, that's the quickest way to underwhelm fans, voters, people alike.
And I think you've approached this from the player's perspective, but I want to discuss it from, say, the media perspective. So let's say that BYU they do beat these teams, right? And this schedule has a lot of wins on it. It has, 6, 7, 8, maybe not, I don't know. BYU is going to have to out-at-large a Power 5 team that took second or third, right, in their conference. And to me, margin of victory will play a role there. It's not something, like you said, BYU should focus on, but when College Game Day is discussing the merits of BYU if they happen to be 8-0 or whatever, they can't be looking at a 7-point win against UTSA and a 10-point win against. They're going to need to see some 20 and 30-point margins to be like, listen, I know BYU didn't play a strong schedule, but they beat up on most of these teams. How do you feel about that?
So let me just right here pause and tell any player on the team that may be watching the show right now, please change the channel. Right? And now that they're gone, absolutely. I mean, when Greg, Mitch, and I were driving to our hotel after the game, that was where our first thoughts were like. It was like, man, if we can take care of business against these opponents and do what we should do, we might be in a New Year's 6. Right? And especially at that time where the Big Ten and the Pac-12 weren't going to play football, and it's still up in the air what remains to be seen in those bowls. I mean, if we see the BYU team that came out against Navy and handled business the way that they did, if we see that consistently through however many games, and if you are an evaluator, if you're the media, or if you're a coaching voter, BYU has, from the beginning, has made a dedication to play whoever it makes sense and whoever is available to play. You cannot fault them who's ended up on the schedule. That's circumstances outside of their control through COVID, scheduling logistics, and other restrictions from other conferences. So if they come out and take care of business the way they do, absolutely you do that. And it is a thin line that we're talking about, because if you do mess up and you have a late comeback and you get an ugly win, that does matter in the eyes of the voters, and that could be the difference between ending up in a New Year's 6 or just another bowl.
Riley Nelson with us on BYU Sports Nation.
And I expect there to be either a loss or a close win, because that's just what happens with everybody, literally everybody. Alabama, Clemson. What is it with Clemson and like NC State? They always play this close game or whatever. I'm okay with a close win or 2, but there can't be like a bunch of them. There's got to be some really impressive performances. And I don't expect, like you said, 55-3 is silly to expect. But if BYU can win by 3 scores, 17+ in the majority of these, I'm good with that. Yet, it feels like Troy is one of these kind of sneaky games where this could be closer than people think. Like Vegas is saying BYU by 14, but I don't know. This feels like a 1-score, maybe a 10-point game here.
If I were in that locker room, I would be saying, first of all, I don't know if we have anybody on the roster from the South. I know we got dudes from Texas, but I mean like Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi.
Malik Moore, who currently isn't, he's rehabbing. Yeah.
Right, but I would get Malik up in front of a team meeting and be like, hey, tell us a little bit about what football's actually like down there, because this roster is full of dudes, Alabama, Georgia, in the Deep South, where look, we all love football. Don't get me wrong. BYU fans are some of the most passionate, but when you spend time with both football players and football fans, with those guys in the Deep South, it goes above and beyond even for me, who my whole life revolves around football. It's on another level. For these guys, there is no plan B. There is no anything else. It is all football. So anytime you're lining across the ball from dudes that come from that background, where football has been almost a religious aspect of their lives, you have to be careful, because they have a level of investment that is tough to match. Secondly, these are guys let's take their middle linebacker, right? He's 5'9", he's making tackles, plays all over the field, right? But he's 5'9", like 208. The dude can play. The only reason, he's probably got the instincts, the athletic ability, the speed to where he could have been a major conference recruit, but his genetics happen to spit out 5'9", right? So you still got guys that can play the game great. Now, you should have a little bit of a size, probably a little bit of an athletic advantage, but don't underestimate the fact that these guys have grown up with football being as more important to them than any other aspect of life.
Carlton Marshall is who you're referring to. He's incredible.
He's a stud. Yeah, Riley Nelson with us on BYU Sports Nation. Riley, then there's the wild card of COVID-19, and this is raising my group of 5 opponent anxiety level because I'm not sure who's going to run out on the field for either side until that ball kicks off. So I think we need to consider margin of victory based on who's actually playing in the game.
So, but the problem is when you have a 10:15 Eastern time kickoff, you don't get that luxury because all of those voters, which the majority are east of the Mississippi, are going to wake up, check the score, the box score on the ESPN app, and make their judgment off that. Like, we wish that these guys took it more seriously, but the reality is, and it's been documented, especially like the coaches poll, that they don't even submit their own ballot. They have an executive assistant do stuff like that. We know that you have to be, the most impressive place that you have to be is on the box score. But that said, look, you hate to see like season-ending injuries, which is stuff that has tested BYU's depth in the past. And I feel bad for Tristan Hodge that, his dad came out and said he's got pneumonia and after having COVID-19 and he's dealing with stuff, and for anybody else affected by it. But this has been a repeating theme through independence with BYU is that we need to increase our depth. Well, while it may be arbitrary and while it may be unfortunate, what better way to actually test the depth and develop the depth of the program than be in a scenario where, based on test results that are administered on Friday and that are known Saturday, that's who's going to go out and line up. So that forces the level of everybody on the depth chart to raise their level of preparation, be ready to play, and when called upon, come out and perform. So I guess while it is a negative circumstance, that would be a positive scenario for me in that it's a great opportunity to build the depth within the program at every position.
Riley, it's always great to talk with you, man. You're full of football wisdom and great insights, and we appreciate the passion you bring to the program.
You bet. Thanks for having me on.
You got it. Riley Nelson on the Deseret First Credit Union Hotline. Deseret First, you know why, we show how.
Some great points by Riley per the norm. And 8:15 Eastern is the start of the pregame on BYU Radio Saturday. So you can listen to those guys. Always good stuff. Coming up, why Tyler Algier is playing for more than himself this season.
And will BYU be the Houston Cougars' season opening opponent on October 16th?